get started. My name is Eric. This is Matt. We're both trainers at GitHub, and that's about the most interesting thing about us, so we'll just skip that and get started. How many of you are coming to this talk with a good grasp of Git and GitHub concepts? Raise your hand if so. Oh, okay. Okay. So if we pretend half of you didn't raise your hands, then we're perfect. When I say that, when I say have a good grasp, it's kind of hard to tether to, so I want to actually ask you a question with a picture. How many of you can tell me, or could tell your neighbor, you're not going to, but how many of you know what each symbol means? This is one of our shirts, and people wear it, and I'm like, hey, do you know it? Nope, that's fine, okay. So if you walked in today and you registered at the booth, you saw these actually on the ground, and since this is Universe, I'm sure that some of you probably thought, oh, cool, like alien signs. These are great. It has to do with our theme. It has to do with Universe. I know I thought that because I saw this. I actually ran out and took this picture just now, and I was like, wow, Pac-Man's having a bad day today. Aliens. I actually, another fun story with this. Before I came in here and made that joke, I was like, wait, is this a startup? Because I don't want to offend anybody, and that looks like a very startup-y image right there. So we're actually going to be talking about these things through today. So there were more hesitant hands that went up, and we want, at the end of this talk, when we show this image again, we want everyone's hands to go up because they understand what this is, what each symbol means, and they have a deeper understanding of all of those items. So that's our goal. That's what we're tethering to. Before that, some expectations. Let's talk about where you're at. Regardless of your proficiency level, know this: Matt, myself, and all of the trainers for GitHub go to every single client site that we teach enterprise to, and we start with the GitHub Flow. The GitHub Flow is, oh, I wrote this down. This is a very good sentence. It is the simplest combination of Git and GitHub that exists while still creating a robust workflow for your teams. And that's why we do it. We always start with this because it is the simplest way for people to start coding. So if you have no background in making requests, in working with version control, this is the best way to start, just because it covers all of those concepts in a simple but detailed way. So where are we going? Disclaimer, that said, this workflow might not be the one that your team follows. A development workflow might use something like GitFlow or whatever your teams use. So we're not going to be advising you specifically on how to change your whole workflow and go back to your team and be that person who went to that thing last week who has ideas, because that happens. But your team might have your own flows. So wherever you go, we just want you to have a deeper grasp of all of these items that are incorporated into each of those things. If you do have questions about specific flows, we have an Ask Services booth that you can go to, set an appointment for free, and have very in-depth conversations about your team and where they're at. So let's get started. If you were at training day yesterday, you know I love metaphors, so obviously I'm going to start with a metaphor. But that'll be the first thing we do. Then Matt is going to come up, and he's going to go in depth on everything. So I'm going to give you the overview here. Matt's going to go in detail, and then at the end, we're going to have time for questions. And if you have questions that you don't want to ask here, we'll have another hour, I believe between 1 and 2, over at the speaker office hours area. So here's the metaphor. This isn't going to be tied to code yet, so if you're like, why is he talking about restaurants? I'll get there. Trust me, let's follow along. Okay, so I own a restaurant. Start imagining that. I own a restaurant, and it's awesome. It has all the best food, whatever your favorite is, I have it. Good drinks, whatever, everything that I'm doing is perfect. And Matt is my friend, and he comes to me, and to bring this to GitHub terms, we open an issue to start a discussion. And he says to me, hey, your restaurant's awesome. I would like to also do the same exact thing as you. Eventually, I'm going to want to make changes, but to start, I want to do the exact same thing that you're doing. I'm like, okay, let's try that. Let's see how that works. Let's see how that happens. So he makes his own branch. But then he starts getting ideas. He gets really ambitious. He's like, OK, so I had this copy of your restaurant, and everybody loves it, but we can make it better. So he creates this idea of burger of the day. And on Monday, he releases a new burger. And he tests it out. He tries to see how it's going to work with his clients and how it can be deployed. He does another one because he's getting really excited. He's got good ideas. They're taking off. Everybody likes the burgers of the day. He does 2 at once. He does 2 burgers in one day. Nobody does that. He's a trendsetter. Then we start a discussion about it. So he comes to me and he says, OK, everybody loved this burger, and this burger, and this burger, but maybe not this burger, so what do you think about that? What do you think about these changes that I have made? Meanwhile, we observe, my restaurant is unchanged. I've done nothing new. We're just working as we always have with no changes. I'm not trying anything ambitious at my restaurant. I'm letting Matt be my guinea pig. So we have that discussion. And I say, OK, I liked this burger. I didn't like this burger. Let's add another one. Let's do these things. And then I bring it back. And this is where the metaphor dies, because Matt did a great job, and now your restaurant's dead, and mine's going to continue with all your changes. Excellent. So we continue on. And now his restaurant's ideas are a part of my restaurant, and his doesn't exist. So let's bring that back. Let's apply the actual terms that we use to that. And let's look at those images so that when you see that picture at the end, you know what they are. You know what they relate to. So the first thing we did, and I said this verbally, was we opened an issue. And that's just our workflow at GitHub. Everything we do, we actually communicate through issues and pull requests. But then we created a branch. So that item on the left, that little branchy flow thing is creating a branch. We started with that. Then we added changes. We added commits. So every burger that he added, every new idea, was a commit, and that's what that symbol means. Then when we started our discussion, and at GitHub we like to do this early and often. In fact, sometimes we open a pull request with empty documents just so that we can start communicating with each other around the changes that we're hoping to make. And that seems to be something that most departments are familiar with. We have that communication, which is that middle symbol. We open that pull request, and then we go and we discuss. We go back and forth. We communicate about the changes that we've made. We make new commits. We make more discussions. Sometimes it takes a while for your items to be merged because everybody's coming in, and it's actually really awesome because so many opinions can be met and discussed. Then, when we're ready, when we're like, OK, this works, this looks good, we've tested it, we're ready to move forward, we merge. And that's it. That's all of the pictures that are on that shirt that are a part of our flow. Now, before I said that these items, this idea can be applied to every workflow, and that's true. Let's look at the Git flow. So we have a deployment flow, basically, and we start with a master. And we make branches, and we bring them back, and we make new branches, and this starts to look complex. These ideas can feel kind of daunting, especially if you're newer to this, but it is all based on the extension of the idea that you are making branches where you can test things in a safe place, where you are starting discussions, and where you are eventually merging those items back. Git is a place where you can make mistakes in a nice, easy, convenient way, and it doesn't hurt you later. So Matt is going to go in detail on all of that, starting with the 2-stage commit.
There we go. Oh, hey. All right, so we just kind of covered the quick workflow. So now I'm going to talk about what we're doing when we're working locally. And we're going to start by talking about the 2-stage commit and the different, say, working areas that you have. Unfortunately, the first part is actually called the working directory, so it's kind of difficult to say, like, this is how you work, but here's the working directory. So your working directory contains any files that you add to a Git project, but haven't necessarily added it to your Git repository to track. So those files are called untracked files. Any file that you've previously added to your Git repository to be tracked and then made changes to, those get identified as modified files. And then files that you delete are also kind of tracked within Git and kind of hang out in your working area until we start using some of the commands that are related to pushing our content from our local directory up through a commit and then using push up to our remote repository, whether it's on your GHE or GitHub Enterprise account or your github.com site. So in this example, we're going to use git add to add a couple of files to our staging area. So using some Keynote magic, we're going to move some things over. And so using git add, we've added these 3 files to the staging area. And from there, what we're able to do is kind of identify, OK, I'm kind of ready to commit these to my repository as a change. Maybe you've made some modifications to a website, so your HTML or CSS file, or I'll pretend like I code, so you made some changes to your Ruby project, and now you've staged it, right? That's terms. So now that we've staged it, we can say, OK, like we like the files that we modified and that we've added to our staging area, but one of the files that we changed isn't necessarily ready, and we can actually remove that from the staging area and send it back to our working directory so that when we make our commit, it's not submitted to our history. So then we can do the git commit feature, or the git commit command, and throw these 2 files into our git history so that when we make a push, after maybe a couple of commits, you can see what the changes have been throughout time. But when we're making commits, we have to make commit messages. So just like every tech talk, there's always an XKCD that kind of works and relates to what we're talking about. So I found this one. And this is where, as you're making a bunch of changes to your project, your commit messages probably start to get really, really bad because you're just tired of explaining what you're doing. I'm notorious for bad commit messages, so it is what it is. But I typically actually start at the here have code and down. I don't even bother with the first stuff. That being said, there are some suggestions on making commit messages that aren't terrible. It's online. Chris Beams made it. It's not necessarily rules that you live or die by, but it definitely gives you some ideas for how to make commit messages that are much better than what you're probably already doing. And he definitely defines some of the things that, like why you need to do certain things. So if we look at a handful of these, if we want to, limiting the subject line to 50 characters is actually a Git requirement, but by limiting the characters, it makes your commit message concise, and the changes that you've made or the change that you made or trying to describe within your subject line, it really makes you think about what you're writing. So you're not verbose for no reason. You don't write things like, here, have code. You talk about made a change to index or something along those lines. Don't use your subject line as the end-all be-all way to describe the change that you've made. Kind of treat commit messages like an email. You have a subject and you have a body. Use your body to really describe and go into detail why you made this change. You don't necessarily have to go into what you changed unless it's going to be beneficial later down the line, but the why is probably more important because people are able to identify what you changed looking at the before and after, right? The different views of what you modified and what has changed since you made this commit. But explaining why you're doing it for the future of your project is going to be much more helpful, especially in, like, say, an open source environment where you might be getting people jumping on your project 6, 9, 12 months into your project, let alone years later, and trying to get an idea of what's been going on. So by using commit messages and using like a body to really describe what you're doing, you really make it easier for people to jump into a project and help out and understand what's actually going on underneath. A couple of other things, the imperative mood in your subject line. If you can finish the sentence, adding this commit will blank, that blank is what your commit message should be. Saying things like fix the index.html file isn't necessarily what you need to say. Adding this commit will fix the HTML file. It just makes it easier to read. He definitely goes into the nitty-gritty details of it. It makes for a much cleaner commit history, especially when you start looking at something that's a lot longer. Moving from commit messages. So we've made some commits, right? And now we have to make a pull request. And when we make a pull request, we kind of have to follow the same ideas behind your commit messages. So I'm going to show you a pull request that I made 2 months ago. So this is me. This is real. I made this in July. This was a PR that I made. So this was terrible. My commit message or subject was add an idea. I didn't provide any description as to what I was trying to do with this change or this pull request. I didn't mention anyone. I didn't ask for people to look at what I was doing or why I was changing this stuff. And I didn't use any of the other features that GitHub provides in terms of collaboration, especially when it comes to reviewing a PR that I'm trying to merge. So if we look at some of the areas that I could have used to make this pull request a lot better, or at least useful. So the first thing that I should have done was made a subject line that actually provided more detail, or at least an idea of what I was working on, as opposed to saying, add an idea. The other thing that I definitely should have done was really gone into a description, identified what I had changed, or why I was changing what I did, and made it easier for anyone that I mentioned within the UI as to like what I actually needed them to do, like a call to action. Like, I need you to look at this because it works locally for me. I want to make sure that when we push it out, it's not going to break. Or this is a really quick bug fix to something on master. We need to push this out quickly. Can I get 2 thumbs up? And let's push it out. We're huge on using emoticons or emoji to kind of give the thumbs up. We're huge on the thumbs up, ship it squirrels, basically anything, and the ship itself, just to, maybe identify with 2 thumbs up, this is good to go, I'm going to push it out. But again, no one's going to do that for me because I haven't mentioned them. I haven't called them out and said, like, I need you to help me. Some other things, I could have put a label on it. So these are just some examples of some of the labels that we actually have within our services training department or team. So this is just a way to identify what this issue or pull request actually relates to. And it's super helpful. We sometimes see this in open source projects where you use a label to say, like, this might be a beginner project or a beginner problem that you need help with. And it's kind of like a stepping stone as to how to get someone to jump into your project. From say, an enterprise level, you can use these things to either prioritize items, identify them as something for an upcoming release, or something that's like slated way out into the future. But it's just a really, really quick visual tool to look at an issue or a PR and see what this is actually related to. So for example, we use book club because we try and read a book once a month, and we have an issue that we use to like describe or discuss like the book in like a term of notes. And that just makes it easier for us to like find the book of the month that we're reading within our issues. Milestones are something else that you can do. Milestones kind of act, especially with this new update for projects, which just got announced like a half hour ago. So milestones kind of allow you to identify like a project timeline for, say, a specific new release. So in this example, this was for yesterday's training day curriculum, which we were late on. But you can identify, say, version 2.0 is coming up. You need to assign some certain issues, certain PRs to it. And then as those issues and PRs are closed, your timeline or your completion limit or rate is kind of checked off, and you eventually will hit 100%. It's definitely a really, really quick and dirty way to manage your project. It's definitely not like the only solution, but it gives you a really quick visual as to where a project is, especially when you get that email or a phone call that says, what's going on with 2.0, where are we at, what's happening. Just by like quickly being able to say like, oh, we're at 85%, these are the issues, or these are the PRs that we need to finish, maybe we have to push them out. It's just something that you can do to kind of make your PR better, and your project might be a little bit better because of it. And then finally, you can obviously @mention people, but you can also assign people. So we're able to assign up to 10 people onto a pull request. These are the 3 people that were involved in yesterday's Get Cozy at training day. So here I was able to assign these 3 people. It alerts them that they've been assigned to a project. It gives some it gives a visual to other people that are within the project who are the major stakeholders. So if someone came into this pull request or an issue, or this pull request and said, hey, I want to provide some help, or I have some questions about what you guys are doing, or something that you said is completely wrong, how this would allow them to know who they should actually be reaching out to, as opposed to say maybe anyone that was in the discussion tab. This actually gives them like the primary stakeholders. And this is a little bit different than the app mention, because this actually like assigns them to the project as opposed to an app mention where you're just asking someone to like jump in, maybe weigh in on something. It just kind of subtly divides them between stakeholders and just people assisting a project. And then we would merge it, right? So we have our files, and all of the content that we worked on, we used our pull request where we actually used like a correct subject line and maybe added a body that actually asked people to do certain things. People gave us a thumbs up, maybe the ship it squirrel, whatever emoji you're into. And then we're able to merge, and that's why that big green button allows it. So this big green button allows us to merge because everything's hunky-dory. If we were running to merge like merge conflicts, we'd obviously have to fix those. But for the sake of this example, I said that merge conflicts never happen. So we have the big green button. And then finally, I just want to really, really quickly kind of cover some of the integrations or integrations in general. So obviously, GitHub as a platform allows you to collaborate on code, but there are a lot of integrations and partners that we have. And we talked about this very briefly this morning, where there are a bunch of companies out there that are trying to make your GitHub workflow better, whether it's code review, deployment management, I'm trying to think what else. I have like a whole laundry list. Anyway, this website here, this github.com/integration, actually kind of provides an entire laundry list of all of the different integrations that are available to you based on like what you are trying to accomplish with your project, whether it's project management or just kind of like collaboration, communication with things like Slack or Gitter. But all of these can be integrated into your repositories or your projects and kind of just make collaboration a little bit better or easier. And now I'm going to throw it back to Eric so he can discuss that t-shirt again.
Shut this off. Okay, now we're back. So we're back here. Are these still alien symbols? Some of us. Raise your hand if you can name every one of these at this point. Okay, good, because if not, we have enough time to just double that and do it again. So we branch, we make changes, and branching, so let's go through this one more time. Branching is so safe. There is so much fear that people have when first starting, when they first work with Git, that they're going to do something and everybody's going to see it because it's all public and they're going to break it. If you make your own branch, you're going to be okay. If you make a branch, you are basically creating a divergence of one specific point in time, so you almost have an exact clone of the repository that you started with, and whatever contributions you make, whatever testing you do, if it burns, if it fails, that's fine. If he burned down my restaurant, it'd be a bummer for him. And then I could keep going. Making changes. Who's to say that your changes are actually going to be applied? That's why he says use that imperative mood. This commit exists if I merge this, it will add the change. If I choose not to merge this, it will not add the change. So you write your commits with the very idea that what you do is impermanent, that it can be adjusted, that your team can communicate when you start that pull request. The third one, it's a pull request. We're learning these. So every time that you communicate, every time that you collaborate, you go through these principles, and it will make your team stronger. It will make your team basically have more autonomy and at the same time have a closer collaborative community because everyone gets to see everything that happens. At GitHub, basically everything we do in the whole company, we can go read. So we have almost our entire, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Sorry, Chris. We have everything on GitHub, and we communicate in that way. We are very productive. We work across departments because we are able to have pull requests and because we use this flow so extensively. We end with a commit, and then we merge when we get that thumbs up that Matt said. So we have about 15 minutes left. We know that you started late, so everyone's probably super hungry, and we're not trying to keep you from that. So anyone who wants to leave, you may. If you would like to ask questions, come on up. We have 15 minutes for you, and we also have that extra hour later. Thank you for coming. Yeah. Oops.
Can you talk? No? Why don't you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
Can you talk briefly about rebasing?
Talk
and
briefly about rebasing.
Why people swear by it and how it integrates with this kind of workflow and why it's the answer to every Git question on Stack Overflow?
Yeah, so if you are leaving, please try and keep your voice down because we do have questions. So if you are communicating, definitely do that out there, but we do have questions that are being asked, so please be respectful to those people.
You want to repeat that?
Yeah, kind of. I didn't hear most of it.
So the question just was, to paraphrase it, so where does rebase fit in this workflow? And why is rebase always the answer on Stack Overflow, give or take? That was the question? Yeah? OK, so all right, so I'm going to take some of this, and then I'm sure Eric will throw in his ideas. So a lot of the times on open source projects, they like the idea of a rebase because it allows them to really squash some of the commits and create not really the squashing of the commits, it allows them to create a cleaner, more linear commit history on the master branch, which people just enjoy or prefer to see visually.
I'm going to bring up a live example. Let's see. So in open source, there's a tendency towards a lot of commits. And so I'm bringing this up right now because we have commits here on an introduction to GitHub platform that we use. And you can see everybody's commits being added, and you can also see a ton of clutter here where we're doing merges. If you rebase, you will avoid the merge commit, and so it's an easier, tidier history. So people would choose to, instead of merging, they would choose to rebase so that they would avoid a cluttered history, and that's generally when it's used on open source. Does that address your question about where rebase fits into the flow? It's a little different. So you could start with a pull request, and we actually now have the ability to rebase and merge on GitHub. That's a new feature. So at the point where you merge, you would do rebase instead of just merge, that last item on our picture. Right there. No.
So we don't, the company I work for, we don't use Git Flow. But I was wondering about the pull request feature. It's fascinating to me. We have a very simple, all our developers are in the master. We create release branches, so we branch on release. If we find something in a release branch that we need to pull back in the master, we cherry pick that at the commit level. But we're getting more and more into the developers taking branches for what they call feature development. And so when you do a pull request, is that I'm conceptualizing that as a description about, ooh, I want to work on this feature, or maybe I want to do something really big that is outside of our weekly deploy cycle and that kind of thing. Is that what? Can you use pull requests outside of the flow, or do you have to be on Git Flow?
Okay. So the question, just in case it didn't get picked up, was can you use pull requests out of the flow, or would it have to be within our GitHub Flow? And
Right, because I mean we have a process that works for us and blah blah blah, you know. So
you got it. Are you taking it?
I'm going to let you talk. I'm going to pull something up.
Okay, cool.
I mean, are those pull requests actually that's built in as part of the flow, right?
Yep.
So if
So,
you're not running the flow, if you're not using that, then you can't do pull.
No, you definitely still can. So
You
pull
can.
requests can happen in any workflow that you use, just maybe in a different order. It's whenever you want to incorporate changes into your code base. So a pull request, when we explain it, by definition, is a conversation around a change.
Right.
So you create that conversation at whatever point you would use in your workflow,
Okay.
and then it would result in a change that you merge in at the end. So
Okay, so-
however, yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, we have an organization on GitHub.com, so we can use that pull request feature today.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right.
And
to
you can
know.
use the assignees and the app mentions and everything that Matt described as well.
Okay.
So he's creating
And-
an example.
And could I enforce it when a branch is taken, or is there a mechanism to do that?
Yeah, so if you want to make it so that the branch is protected,
Yeah.
you can certainly do that. And that's in the settings.
Well,
So
when you
that-
say the branch is protected, it's just nobody else can change it, or I can't merge it back.
Great question. So you would be protecting it from a force push, or maybe if it wouldn't pass a build.
Okay.
So if you're using the integration tools, you can make sure that you don't allow a change to be incorporated if there's a break, or if there's not a certain number of approvals that you set, which is also a new feature today.
But help me understand, how would that tie into the pull request? Because the pull request is just it's a communication vehicle, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Matt will take that.
okay.
So it's kind of, so it's obviously a discussion tool, but it's also allowing you to make the proposed change. So for instance, I made like a really, really quick, dirty crap example. So here we have two branches, right? We have our master, we'll call that our deployment, and then I made this new branch called BR.
Okay.
And on my BR branch, I made a change, and I hope I'm getting your question right, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
No.
So on my BR branch, I made changes to the readme.md file. And so when I make my pull request, I can assign my base or like the branch that I want to compare my changes to. So here we have our master and then the BR, and then I'm going to quickly make this. So now we have our again with my terrible description skills. So here we have our pull request where I can start having a conversation about the changes that I've made. And when we use this merge pull request, the files that I made changes to actually change. So when I do this merge, if I go back to the code tab, the README file now has the changes that I made based on that new branch.
But the merge was separate from the pull request, right? to
It's the
begin with?
culmination of your
It's,
pull
yeah,
request.
it's when your pull request is done and you've had your discussion and you say, hey, this is good to go.
Okay.
It's kind of like, okay, this pull request is done, let's merge it in, let's
Okay,
finish.
and then I can put maybe approvers or whoever I want to say, yeah, I agree this. Okay.
So if you had like two reviewers that are in charge of reviewing every pull request made against like your development branch, they would review it, say, yeah, good to go, you can merge it, and then you would merge it.
Or you could mention specific people, which is what we do when we want to incorporate a change to our curriculums. It's like, hey, Matt, can I get your thumb on this? Can I get 4 thumbs up, and then I will merge? So part of our workflow is whoever opens the pull request merges the pull request at the end.
Okay.
Yep.
So the pull request is actually the start of your merge process then,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yep, perfect.
It's starting the communication process.
And then if for whatever reason it's not accepted, then what happens? I mean,
Well, I mean, there's a couple things that can happen. One, maybe the pull request doesn't, maybe the files that are being changed, it's just something that doesn't need to happen. So maybe you're adding a feature that long term doesn't need to happen or needs to get pushed off for a long time. I mean, you can essentially delete your pull request, but keep your branch. So maybe that pull request doesn't need to exist for a while. That branch can either exist or you can delete it. Just because you make a pull request doesn't mean it needs to culminate in a merge.
okay.
There are more advanced features like cherry pick, where if
Yeah.
you want to take the commits from that branch and put them on a different one, you can just close the pull request that has to do with that branch and open a new
We
one.
use cherry pick for our, we branch on release, but if we find something, at the last minute and we need to make a change, then we cherry pick it back to the master. That's our process. But
Yeah.
okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're
thank
welcome. Hey.
Hi guys.
Hey.
Thanks for the talk. So correct me if I'm wrong. Pull requests, if it cannot merge directly and there are like conflicting changes, it cannot be fixed via the UI, right?
Correct.
We'll
You-
have to go to the command line or to a tool to do that. So do you guys have any future plan of getting it into the UI, or is that something that not even talked of?
So I know, I want to say that. I was going to say, yeah, so I was going to say either Adam already has a plugin or they're adding that to base functionality. I don't want to say something to be completely off base
Okay.
or wrong, but I know that you can handle a lot of merge conflicts using Adam or other tools,
Yeah, the tools make it easier, but
Yeah.
sometimes something is just so simple and it's right there.
Oh, okay,
And
so you asking like
your-
specifically
the
like, is this
UI.
going to be in the GitHub UI?
Yeah.
I mean, they haven't told me yet,
Okay.
but I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, but
Okay.
that's still a tool, not on the UI.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Right. Okay.
We can say that sounds like a cool idea.
So to say what Jamie just said, GitHub Desktop.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
well, I know you heard. I just
Yeah.
rest of the
and-
room. So GitHub Desktop's like a GUI, but it's not. Again, it's not the same
Yeah, I had
as
another-
online at
Another
all.
question. So I know that you guys with Git Flow, you're trying to tell us that it's good practice to develop in another branch and not master. But there's companies like Google that everybody's just committing on one master branch. And although it might not be having the most stable release, they have release branches, and that's a completely different paradigm. So is there cases where one's better? Is it because of the type of projects they do in small teams? That's better for them, or is it just that you think the Git flow is the right way to do for everybody?
I can add to that. I mean, we do that. So we're running a continuous integration process. We run that on our master because that's where all the developers are.
Yeah.
To give them the immediate feedback, right? So that's kind of one reason. It's kind of, I mean, we can do CI in our release branches, but it's really more manual. You have to set some things up. So that's one.
Okay.
Just a time warning, we have about 1 minute and 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. That's it. Thank you.
So real quick, when it comes to flows and workflows in general, I mean, we use the GitHub Flow.
Okay.
Other people use the Git Flow. It just comes down to understanding how a flow can be better or worse or whatever, and
Yeah.
just making smart choices. There's no, this is how you
Okay.
need to be a developer, but identifying or looking at being able to even like do this with your current workflow in terms of like identifying how you work,
Yeah.
you might be able to find some like problem areas and
All right.
try and figure those out and solve them, as opposed to some really weird circular development pattern that you're like tripping over yourselves and you guys don't even realize it.
And you guys run CI on every branch, right? Or
Say that again?
you guys run CI on every branch, or
That would be an integrations thing, right? CI on every branch?
like Travis and like testing on every branch? Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
thanks.
So we have 30 seconds left, but we'll
It's all good.
answer whatever your
Oh.
question is with a sentence and then follow up with you later.
Possibly a really simple one.
Yeah.
Something I'm running across. Because these things are organic, by nature of the repo, the functionality will change over time.
Yeah.
The description should also be able to change over time, but the only person that can make that change is the owner,
Okay.
not any of the people contributing to it. How do you guys approach changing that description as
The
a community?
The
for repo?
description meaning this description?
Yep.
That's a great question.
Sorry.
Can you say that one more time?
All right, changing the description of the repo as
Yes.
a community, not as the owner of the repo.
Oh.
How do you
okay.
approach that? One of the communities I'm in, we have 40 plus.
Yeah, but he wants to take that and give it to the
masses. Yeah.
Right, power to the people as opposed to the people owning it.
Jamie's got it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
To,
okay. Well, thank you.
to repeat what Jamie said, she said she would open an issue or a pull request, and that would be how she would approach that. Cool.
Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.